Hello, this video is an experiment. It's me trying to recreate a talk that I gave at an event. And it's an experiment because as well as me talking, it demands that you take part too. Now I don't know whether you're going to join in, but I hope you do, and I hope you learn something from this talk. I'm going to try and convince you to experiment more, and the important thing to remember about experiments is that even if they fail, they can actually be a success. All you need to do is to learn from the failure. For example, for this picture, I learned that it's really difficult for me to write on my right hand. And while you might think that running out of space and squashing that last S in is a failure, I like to think that it still says success, so I'm not too ashamed to share it with you. That's what this talk is about. Experimentation and finding the success even in failures. The first experiment I want to talk about is what happened when 3 designers from the BBC were asked to contribute to a course in design thinking at Manchester School of Art. It was the first time we'd ever done it. The module was 10 weeks long and we had our day jobs to worry about too. There was me, a user experience architect, and 2 designers. The course is called Creative Multimedia and it's as broad as the name suggests. There are modules on designing with Arduinos, creating art installations, basic programming and game design. They've even designed shop windows. We were there to provide a snapshot of what it might be like to be a designer at the BBC. The university wanted us to give them a taste of designing for real users in the real world. The only thing we knew before we started planning the course was that we didn't just want to set the brief. We didn't want it to be one of those relationships where we handed over a brief in week 1, went away, and then returned 9 weeks later with some snooty feedback. A couple of us had done a bit of teaching in the past, and we had this sense in the back of our heads that this was an opportunity for us, as well as for the students. So we set about planning. The first thing we decided was that at least one of us would go every week and teach them something. We wanted each week to connect to the next so that we worked through the brief with them. We wanted to expose them to as many techniques and ways of thinking like a designer as possible, and we wanted to carry on doing our day jobs at the same time. At times these ambitions felt incompatible and unrealistic, but they were evidence of something that we taught and learnt, the importance of confidence. And we wanted to be confident. We walked into the room on that first day, excited but a little nervous. This was a big deal for us. I think a lot of designers, and maybe information architects in particular, have a little bit of imposter syndrome lurking somewhere in the back of your head. I've got this uncle, and we bump into each other every year. And every year he asks me what I do for a living. And I say I'm an information architect. And then he pulls a face that perfectly conveys that he doesn't think that's a real job. And it's not always an easy definition to describe and justify that elusive combination of art and science. The assertion that there's always information architecture, it's just not always been consciously designed, and so there's value in focusing attention on considering the context just as much as content and consumption, doesn't seem to convince him. It very nearly ruins every Christmas. And now I imagine these students asking me to replay that conversation, a squad of combative cousins intent on rumbling any inadequacies in confidence. But we needn't have worried. We should have realised how intimidating 3 experienced designers from the BBC who have come to judge your work can be to a group of second-year undergraduates. There was a lot of silence, a lot of shifting uncomfortably on chairs, and the challenge of overcoming the creative paralysis that resulted from this was one of the major challenges of the whole experience. I think we all need confidence in order to design. We need to be able to take the measured risks that lead to innovation, and we need the confidence to sell and defend our ideas to colleagues. We need confidence to take some action when we really don't know what to do next. We need confidence to experiment and then to stay the course, to trust our instincts and the process we've chosen to follow. Because creativity isn't magic, but it does share similarities with alchemy. Process is probably the thing that will lead most reliably to success, but we need confidence to commit to these processes. We decided to base the course we were teaching on a process, the 5-day sprint process that we've been using at the BBC for about a year or so. We tend to use these design sprints early in a project, during the discovery and definition stage, when we're exploring the possibilities. Each day of a sprint focuses on a different stage of the creative process. You go from understanding user need to testing a design really quickly and do all the stages in between. So it seemed like the perfect model to base a course on. But sprinting is intense. It's maybe not great for beginners, and we had 10 weeks to fill. So we decided to expand the process over 8 weeks. So rather than a sprint, it was more like a fast run. Not quite a jog, a little quicker than that. We kept the same stages we used for sprints. So we worked through understand, diverge, converge, prototype and test. Sprinting usually starts with a dedicated day to understand and define the problem, which seemed to make perfect sense. We stretched this understand stage, giving the students a chance to work on personas, competitor analysis and problem definition, building up empathy. We thought this would bed them in and also importantly give us time to learn their names and what sort of designers they were, so that we could tailor the later stages of the course. It almost worked, but it wasn't perfect. We were so used to following a process that I think we'd forgotten what a leap of faith it takes not to jump straight to having ideas. Those first few weeks didn't feel like design to these students. There might have been post-its and Sharpies, but our repeated insistence that taking time to understand the problem would pay off down the line didn't really hit home. We'd created this vacuum where they weren't exactly sure what was expected of them. This wasn't what they thought design and creativity looked like, so they felt a little bit lost. Then, when we did get to the idea stages, we hadn't built up the trust or their confidence to make the most of the research and thinking that they'd done. We got ideas in the end, good ones, but we recognised that the next time we ran the course, we'd need to focus more on developing that confidence and spending more time modelling what good looked like at the various stages of the design process. We needed to do a better job of explaining that design is a process. It doesn't all look or feel the same. And it's okay to try stuff out and it not to quite work out as planned, as long as you've got a plan. This was the first year we'd done this, so we tried some stuff out and lots of it worked. We ended the course with a full-day workshop where we used a similar diverge and converge process to redesign the course. The students pitched back at us the improvements we could make and we wrote them down, ready to try them out the next time we had a chance to do some teaching. Which brings us to the second experiment. In May this year we got the chance to host 5 summer interns in the design team in Salford. This was part of a BBC North intern scheme which was well established, but in the past the scheme had only taken developers. Now we had the chance to give 5 young designers the chance to join our team, in addition to the developers who joined the more established programme. So it was a first for us, and again I wanted to be ambitious. I sat in a meeting and said that I wanted it to be the best scheme in the world. It isn't. Not yet, but the failure to get there has taught us a lot. We invited applications from 5 local universities that we've worked with in the past. We asked for a portfolio of work and set a small task, a critique of a BBC product or service. We chose 5 students and then invited them in so I could meet them. Then I tried to match them with product teams at the BBC to match their interests and skills and ambitions. We had a student join the CBBC and CBeebies team. We had one join Knowledge and Learning, working on interactive activities for I Wonder. We had Scott, who worked on prototyping new experiences in sport, and James, who worked alongside an information architect in content discovery. And finally, Adam worked with the GEL team to build a responsive site for our design principles. We tried and for the most part succeeded in giving them meaty, interesting work, working alongside experienced designers and producing work that wasn't just throwaway. They weren't playing at being BBC designers. They were starting to develop a professional practice. Throughout the process, we organised mentoring and regular one-to-ones. I designed a one-to-one session with a section called Superhero, and you must say it like that if you ever use this technique. By talking about what they'd already done and what they wanted to do in the future, we identified the superpowers that they had and compared them to the ones they needed for this ideal future. We were then able to design the rest of their time with us to help them develop those skills and have the right kind of experience with us. I used some techniques from service design to design the experience they had while they were with us, so I got to play with some new techniques too. And it worked pretty well. It was a genuine success. So I'm not going to talk about that anymore. Instead, I'm going to talk about a design sprint that I ran right in the middle of their time with us, which was a different kind of success. You remember that I tried to convince you that failure can equal success. It was a little closer to that type. We'd used the sprint process with the university students and spread it over 8 weeks. We'd had lots of time to reflect and improve things as we went, and it had been really hard. So I'm not sure why I thought a 5-day sprint over 5 days would be easier. I'm not sure I did. Maybe I was in deep denial because I also decided it would be cool to invite those developer interns along too. At the BBC we're keen to explore how developers and designers can buddy up and work together more. I thought, what better opportunity to try it out than with developers and designers of the future? What could go wrong? Well, some of the same stuff that had been challenging with the students at university proved to be tricky again. On the first day, nobody was willing to take a risk. The room was quiet. I'd invited designers from different teams across the BBC to come to talk to us and help us understand the brief. They presented to silence. They weren't asked questions. They didn't even get a clap at the end, which is always a nice thing to do. This was one of the hardest days at work I've ever had. And I had a cough. It did get better, the cough and the sprint. The afternoon, after switching some tactics and trying different techniques, things started to look up. And then as day 2 progressed, they warmed up a little bit more. I split them into 2 groups and the competition helped too. Maybe I infected them with optimism, but they became ambitious. They overreached and they almost achieved something great. In fact, greatness did come. Not from their design, but from their experience. Again, we wanted them to have confidence during their design process and openness during testing. And it was the testing where the biggest success came. We'd found that the most valuable experience on the university course was in the user research and testing day. During the module, we'd booked out our usability lab for 2 days, and each of the students had facilitated 2 sessions, testing their prototypes and getting user feedback on their work, rather than just grades from a teacher. One student actually said that in that moment, showing their work to a user, they'd gone from being a student to being a designer. And talking about the course with colleagues, I'd always described how each of the students had left that day walking a little bit taller. I wanted to give our interns a chance of that experience. So even though we had no idea what the students would manage to make in 4 days, we booked a day of testing, we recruited 5 participants, we gave the interns some support and training, and asked them to facilitate the sessions. Design research is an important part of the design process at the BBC, as designers we're expected to think in terms of how we can learn and refine our understanding of our audience as well as our designs. This is a fundamental part of the way we think about design, so we had our design interns facilitating sessions. But I think my proudest moment of the week was when Sophie, one of the developers, stepped up and volunteered to take the first session. I like to think that by sharing our design process, making the values and the value of user-centered design visible, we'd given the developers a chance to question their role and see themselves fully as a part of the creative process. And it was inspiring. It didn't work perfectly, and the biggest problems occurred when we didn't stick to the plan, when we threw away the wrong bits of the process. The whole sprint process is designed to help you diverge and then you converge, moving from idea to tangible representation or prototype that you can test with a user. Maybe it was a lack of confidence or trust in the process and in themselves, but the interns found it really hard to stop having ideas, when they should have been converging and playing out the consequences of their earlier design decisions. They were concentrating on having more ideas, pivoting this way and that as fresh inspiration hit. Inexperience in the developers led them to the naive assertion that they do their best work at the last minute, under pressure. Maybe that's an exam or test-driven mindset inherited from education. I do my best work when I've got plenty of time and a nice cup of tea. But again, they didn't have the experience to know what about the process is there for your own good, and where and how to flex that process. It was a valuable experience for me too. I've facilitated sprints of experienced designers, but you always learn something when you teach, and during that sprint, I learnt a lot. So they were my experiments and my stories about them, and I thought there was something useful in sharing them. But when I wrote the title for this talk in an email 6 months ago, I didn't know a lot of this. I hadn't even done the sprint with the interns, but I suspected that telling these stories, whatever happened in them, there would probably be something in them about creative confidence, the art of designing something and then the science of validating it with a user. I felt sure it would give me something to talk about, something to reflect on, but I didn't really know what this talk was about. I didn't know what the theme was. And then someone told me to read this book. And because information architects find it inherently satisfying to find and form connections, things started slotting into place. It happened gradually, but there was one section that I couldn't stop thinking about and applying to my day-to-day practice. It's a section that talks about a dilemma in professional life. It talks about how often there is a high, hard ground where experienced professionals can apply theory as technique and just get on with things. But he argues that this often isn't where the most interesting or valuable challenges lie. He talks about there being a swampy lowland, where there are confusing messes that don't quite fit into the theories we've learnt. But solving the stuff down there is the most valuable. I think the best designers are the ones who regularly find themselves wading through that swamp. I think the profession demands it of us. but I think there are times when the pressures of everyday design can force us up onto that high, hard land. As an information architect, with that belligerent uncle who you might remember, I'm used to referring people to a definition of a professional practice that is both an art and a science. And if we're lucky, our jobs give us awesome opportunities to work on incredible things which stretch us and inform us. But even then, we can sometimes fall back into a scientific, automatic response and miss the real opportunities in the work that we're faced with. We fail to find that balance between art and science. In my experience, teaching forces us to explore the art in what we do scientifically. It drags us down into the swamp, and it teaches us what to do whenever we find ourselves considering what to do next, because it demands that we reflect. We've got people standing in front of us trying to be good by following our example. Teaching is like standing in front of a magic mirror, entering into a dialogue with our current understanding and helping us to interrogate what good looks like. It reveals the stuff you should be doing more of and the stuff you should throw away. I'm a practitioner, so I'm maybe not the best qualified person to talk about the importance of education and teaching. And I might not be the best place to talk about risks. The BBC is committed to helping grow the next generation of designers where we can. It wasn't a massive risk professionally or personally for me to get involved in teaching. For smaller organisations and individuals it might be. But this sort of risk is good. It helps to refine your process as a designer. And processes are good. A process is like a safety net that gets stronger the more you rely and reflect on it. I know that the measured risk of teaching has paid off and made me a better designer. And so I plan one final experiment. And this one is a risk, as it tries to tie together the pieces of this talk. It tries to prove that design is about process, trust, ambition, experimentation, and the dumb, reckless optimism of inexperience. It's about following rules and knowing what to throw away, and it requires you to take part. So this is the interactive section. Hopefully by now you've downloaded the cheat sheet that I created for the event. It's got 4 principles on it, and the first thing that we need to do with it is to fold it up, because at the start of a design process or an information architecture project, often things aren't in the right shape. So fold it in half, and then fold it in half again. You should arrive at a small rectangle. Now the next thing to do is to tear along the folds you've just created, because as well as things not often being in the right shape, they're often not even in the right size. So tear up your sheet so that you get 4 little pieces. Now the talk I gave was about teaching, and often, whether you're teaching or even if you're just designing, things can sometimes feel like you're operating in the dark, that you haven't quite got the full picture. So take the 4 cards that you've now got and turn them upside down, and then mix them up. Once you're happy that they're mixed, tidy up your pile a little bit, and then hold it in a landscape orientation. Your thumbs should be on the top, and your fingers should be below. Move your thumbs up to the top and the middle, so that you're in the perfect position to tear the cards in half. In fact, do that. Tear them in half. Now you can either put the left-hand packet on the right-hand packet, or the right-hand packet on the left-hand packet. Maybe you're a visual designer, maybe you're an information architect, maybe you're really confident, maybe you're scared, but everyone has got the same sort of challenges. And just so you know that we're not all starting in the same position, which we aren't, move a random group of cards from the top to the bottom. Done that? Now do it again. We're all individuals. Just move a random group to the bottom. Now I had 3 key principles: confidence, trust, and evaluation. So to represent those, take the top 3 pieces and bury them in the middle somewhere. They're probably going to crop up as you experiment, but it's hard to say quite where or how. The thing for certain is, whenever you take a creative risk, whether it's teaching or not, something significant will happen, and out of the disorder, things will start to make sense. So tidy up your pile a little bit, and without looking at the front of it, put the piece that is now on the top in your pocket or sit on it. Keep it safe. This is something you should keep safe and take away with you after this video. Hopefully it will have some significance. But even when you find that thing, stuff can remain complicated. So take the new top bit and put it in the middle. Do it again with 2 pieces at the same time if you want, or not. Now you're experimenting. Take 1 piece, again put it in the middle, or not. It's up to you. Now, if this little experiment really is about teaching or about design, the thing to keep in mind is that it always gets messy. So take the top piece, or the top two, or the top three, and either throw them away or bury them in the middle. This is sometimes what design feels like to me. This is what it feels like to be in the swamp, solving big messy problems. You're just doing your best, clutching onto little bits of paper that you hope have some significance. Who knows if they do at this stage? We've mixed them up, moved them about, we've messed around and thrown away, and now we need to make sense of it. I think any complex problem can be solved in 7 days. You can always make progress after a day, even more after 7. So let's move one piece from the top to the bottom for each day of that week. Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. And that's it. That's my process. And if I'm honest, I'm not sure it always works. I have these crazy ideas, and then right at the end I think, they're never going to go along with this. This is on the internet. There's loads of choice out there. People will have just stopped watching after 30 seconds. These are tiny pieces of paper. What am I doing? But we all suffer these crises of confidence. We should be honest and ask our peers to support us. Otherwise, like students learning the design process, we'll be paralysed with doubt. You need confidence to design, but you should also validate with rigour. It might not seem like it, but I like to go through my ideas and filter them. I sometimes do it in a fairly random way, but I still filter them. The process that I'm using at the minute is kind of like that she loves me not game. But I do it with I'm right and I'm wrong, and I do it with ideas. Let's do it. This is nearly over, I promise. Take the first piece, the top piece, and move it to the bottom. That stands for I'm right. Then take the next one and throw it away. That stands for I'm wrong. Repeat that. You've all got different pieces of paper by now. And at this point, we've just got to trust the process. I'm right, move it to the bottom. I'm wrong, throw it away. And just repeat that until you've got one single piece of paper left. That one represents you, your professional gut, the stuff you know now and the stuff that you believe in. It's the stuff that will be valuable to reflect on and refine. It's the stuff that it will be valuable to go out and teach to someone else. Take the piece that you saved right at the very beginning, the one that represents this experiment, the one thing that you're going to take away. Hopefully they match. If not, don't worry, sometimes a blended approach works too. I hope you got something out of my talk and this little experiment. Most of the time, we're making it up as we go along, and that's okay. But you set yourself up to succeed, even when you fail. Refine your practice, reflect on it regularly, and please do share it. It's the best way to get better.